So hello, everybody. Thanks, Bob, for the introductions. Session 2 of the 2021 ACIL CMET section P2 meeting. So session 1 went good, I thought, and we had some good conversations. So on for session 2.
You wanted me to review where I believe or perceive where an infrastructure package may be, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity. Again, I'm Mike Oscar. I serve as the Government Relations Director for the ACIL, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. I am speaking to you from my car, so I apologize if there's a break in my presentation. I did send around via Bob the link to the Build Back Better plan that President Biden is pushing, and the reason I did that is that really is it's kind of like a template for both the House and the Senate to look at, especially since the House and Senate are controlled by the Democratic Party. And the reason I'm talking to you from the car is because the Capitol is shut down. It's been shut down not only because of the pandemic, but also because of the episode that occurred on January 6th. However, though, you can go to the Capitol, which I was there earlier, if you're called in by a member or a staffer, and I was. The reason I was dealing specifically with this issue, dealing with not only transportation but infrastructure. So I've been meeting today. I met with Senator Cardin from Maryland, who serves as the subcommittee chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee on the Environmental Public Works Committee. And so he has a very prominent and important role on this subject matter. And right now, from his position, we talked with his staffer in length as well, Wheezy, and I'll be meeting with Merkley and Markey and others, Wicker, throughout the next 2 to 3 weeks, because we're really trying to line up what would look like what this package would look like, both in the House and Senate. It is likely, to get out of the House first, probably get out of the House prior to the August recess, and we're in September to get this bill, because right now in the process, let me step back, the reauthorization for transit, for highway and rail are all due September 30th. And what they've done previously.
Excuse me, Mike. This is Bob. Your audio is kind of cutting in and out. Where are you driving right now?
Despite COVID, is just do a 1-year extension. But now that the Democrats, not that it's not been a top priority for the Republican Party, gotten control, and this has been a top priority, but now that the Democrats control all three, both branches of the chambers of the House, of the Capitol, and then also the executive branch, the opportunity they feel is ripe to get something through. Also, can you? Hello?
Mike, you're cutting in and out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, what I'll do then is maybe just pull over. But anyway, so all three reauthorizations are due. They believe they have an opportunity now to get something passed. So what we're looking for, and one of the things that has me somewhat concerned in the Biden plan that would really trickle down for this section, is if you look at the link that I sent over, it's a 22-page document for President Biden.
So yeah, so I think until Mike gets to a better cell location, because that's not fun to listen to that. Let's move on. So we have 2 other topics for this afternoon session. So we have a bunch of accreditors here online, and we are going to talk about, kind of a roundtable and different discussion from various staff on remote inspections, the things that you know, may or may not be working, how it's going. Is it a way of the future? You know, are a remote going to kind of supplant the in-person things? So I don't know that if anyone had a formal presentation or we were going to have a roundtable, but my list shows Dave Savage from Construction Materials Engineering Council, Ingrid Miller from A2LA, Steve Small from CCRL, and Maria Kanaki from MRL. And any others who want to jump in, please do. So, so my first question is, did someone have something prepared to work through? We could do that first and then lead into a discussion. No?
I don't
Okay.
have any presentation, no.
All right,
I
well, let's start with
prepared
Dave, because I
just a
can pick on
few.
him, I know him.
Maria?
Dave,
I'm sorry, Maria?
Maria?
Did you,
Yeah,
you
I
sent
prepared
in
a
a
few,
present?
a few slides, but we can go in the order that you
Okay.
mentioned if Dave wants to speak first, and Ingrid and Steve. That's fine.
Mine is just a few talking points. I figured I'll bounce off whoever, because I'm sure like most of us are probably doing stuff fairly similarly.
I think so. Yeah.
So yeah, I was hoping that you guys would all have questions for us too, and keep the dialogue going.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this, Maria, because you're at the top of my screen. Maria, we'll start with you. And so I don't know, Bob, if you could give her the ability to share her screen.
Just did?
All right. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. So this is very, very brief, but just a few slides on kind of how we got here and where we are now. We started conducting remote assessments still even back in May 2020. We were thinking that we'll be back out on the road in a few months. So we began addressing concerns with customers who had urgent needs first back in May. And those are customers who needed to gain accreditation or add to their current accreditation with a supplemental assessment in May. And then shortly after that, and even really by that time, we had realized we could be doing this for a while and we needed to come up with a long-term solution. So in July, the end of July 2020 is when we resumed our assessment tour completely remotely. We've now done nearly 600 remote assessments remotely. So, some of the things that we did in our planning and the things that I think have really helped us is we put together a team of staff that had varying experience within the organization to get different opinions on how we should move forward. We did a very large risk analysis. That was a large part of what we did in putting this together, rating different risks and how likely they were to occur, et cetera. And then we developed mitigation techniques for those risks, and from that developed our policies and procedures. This had to go through our administrative task group to get their approval to move forward with it. So we did that, and I think we all, at the time we were sitting there in those meetings, we thought, boy, a year ago we never would have thought we'd be approving something like this, but here we are, and this is what we need to do, and it's the right thing to do. And then we made an announcement to customers shortly after we got that approval from the ATG. Just a little bit of our risk identification. A lot of it had to do with technology failures. One of the things that we do during an assessment is check the laboratory's equipment with our kits. We're not able to do that. We're really concerned about fatigue, not only of our staff, but also of the people on the other end who are being assessed. And then, of course, the issue of improper representation of the laboratory. So we put in some mitigation techniques for those. And because there's lots of people to speak, I'm going to go quickly through this. In terms of how it's going pretty well. Honestly, a lot better than I would have thought that it would have been going at this point in time. We're getting really good feedback from customers. We've implemented some new things like a more detailed assessment agenda that customers and assessors have really liked. The screen sharing is really helpful when we're trying to look at records. Both the assessor and the laboratory can share their screen. And it's a lot easier than trying to look over somebody's shoulder on a screen, honestly. So that's been great. When we've needed to get a second opinion on something or for another reason to bring a manager in, that was never easy to do during an on-site assessment, but with remote assessments, it really is. Somebody can hop in pretty easily. Some of the things that are difficult is quality system document submittal. We still have laboratories that have everything in paper. And so they've had to scan those documents in and send them to us. And that's been a big challenge for them. They've had, obviously internet issues have come up where we've had to work with a customer who hasn't had great internet. Screen fatigue is absolutely an issue, as we thought that it might be. So we have to build in breaks and downtime away from the screen. And then sound quality and the ability to communicate can be challenging, especially if you have a laboratory that's running loud test equipment. So we've tried to give laboratories some advice on how to communicate with us a little bit better during these remote assessments. So we've done a lot of things to try to address these challenges. One of the big things we've done is we've held several webinars for our customers on the process to try to prepare them for it. We've got a lot of documents on our website, flowcharts, video tutorials. We have built-in breaks, and we're constantly reminding staff that they need to make sure that they give the laboratory, not just themselves, those breaks, because we found them to be really important through the assessment process. Just a couple of things we've done. We've built some infographics. I kind of want to show these off because they're newer, but I think that they've been really valuable. This is just a little piece of it here, but kind of talking to people about the technology and how to kind of prepare for the assessment, giving them checklists to work through and things to do to test their internet speed. And then of course, tips on document submittal and how to get all those documents to us. So that's pretty much all where we are with it. In terms of what's next, well, quite frankly, the cat is out of the bag. I think that we've seen that this is more effective than, quite frankly, I thought it would be. And I think that more than a lot of people thought it would be. Our customers are seeing that it's effective. Our assessors are seeing that it's effective, and I don't see it going away. I don't see on-site assessments going away either. I still think they are important, and there's some things that we can only do when we're on site, but they are a useful tool. In terms of to what extent we will be using them in the future, we hope to get a lot more feedback from customers, and that's one of the reasons I was excited to be here today. But also we have to have input from our administrative task group. Our oversight group has to kind of give us the direction in terms of what they're comfortable with as well. So we're not exactly sure where the future goes. It's something that we're working on internally and thinking about and talking about pretty regularly, but I do see remote assessments as something that will be here to stay. We did use them a little bit prior to the pandemic, especially for supplemental assessments. So they were already in our repertoire a little bit, but this is just kind of sped up, I think, something that was probably going to come eventually anyway. So that's my thoughts, and I'll pass the baton on to the next person.
Okay, great. Thank you, Maria. Very nice.
How do I stop sharing my screen?
Dave Savage.
All right. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maria. We're still probably a little bit stubborn. We're still doing mostly on-site assessments. Probably 90 to 95% of our assessments are still on-site. So we've been able to travel around, travel about, perform the assessments. The cases where we're not, or when you're getting out of the lower 48, of course, if you have to travel to Canada, the islands, anywhere like that, we are doing those remotely. We're doing those virtually. But like I say, in the US, in the lower 48, with the agreement, the assessor contacts the laboratory, as long as we're following the company's policy for COVID. And as long as everybody's in agreement, we will go on site and do the assessment. It's been working well. Everybody seems happy with it so far. So that's something a little bit different than most people are probably doing. So that's not bad. A lot of the things that Maria touched on.
I think that's the way to deal with this, is just to say that
when you're doing the remote assessments, it's true. I mean, it's difficult. I just almost feel in this industry, and there may be other industries out there similar, that you don't get a true feel for the laboratory unless you're on site, because there's a lot that goes on over in the corner of the laboratory, out the front door, all over the place. So we feel pretty strongly that we're going to try to continue with those on sites as long as possible. But really, we were shut down the months of March and April of last year. since then, we've picked it back up and, we're carrying on as we did before.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
it hasn't been too much difficulty. We're kind of enjoying that right now. Hopefully it doesn't change anymore.
And I would imagine most laboratories are going as they have, with some safety precautions, but everybody's for the most part working or
Yes, yes.
laboratories.
A lot of places are considered essential employees. They're all working as they did before. There's no difference going on. You walk in, of course, everybody's got masks and they're trying to do their social distancing. But as
Mm.
far as testing is concerned, from what I've seen, I mean, labs are booming. They're busy as can be out there. There's no slowdown whatsoever. So
Right,
good for them and good for us, I guess, as well. So, and
right.
good for you guys. So that's great. But really, I don't have much more to offer, as far as assessments are concerned. That's what we're doing and seems to be working well.
Okay, great, thanks. Ingrid, did you have something to add? Or
Yeah, well, I can just kind of do some talking points here too. I mean, like the other accreditation bodies, I mean, we all had to pivot very quickly last year. I mean, actually, our CEO sent out an email and said tomorrow is actually the 1-year anniversary of us being sent home. So I mean, it's crazy how much has changed. How busy we were, honestly. So basically how we kind of handled everything was it was pretty much full stop traveling, because we didn't, with all the travel restrictions and like various countries that we were dealing with, it was just easier to just say, you know what, we're doing most assessments remotely. There was a lot of work that went into that. We, like AASHTO and everybody, had to put together guidance documents on how to even conceivably run these assessments, get training out to our assessors, make sure everyone's kind of on the same page, and kind of have specific, like guidelines and, restrictions that we needed to put into place to make sure that it was still going to be considered equivalent to an on-site assessment. So basically how we kind of handled it was initially we were thinking that it wasn't going to be as long as it was. So we started kind of just doing quality system portions remotely and then kind of pushing out the technical component to hopefully, in a few months, we're going to be back on site. Once we realized that wasn't going to happen, we started implementing a system so that we could do everything remotely. So, through Teams, Zoom, GoToMeeting, but we had to make sure that all of our customers were able to facilitate technical observation out in the lab. And like everyone else, our biggest issues with that are Wi-Fi connection issues, paper documentation systems, all of those. And so those are all actually considered, we've been doing risk assessments for each individual lab, because, each one of us accreditation officers manages a good portion of them, and we're fairly familiar with their systems. But it's all been pretty much handling everything case by case, which is not necessarily an efficient means of doing that. But I mean, there's been some lessons learned. I mean, throughout our TAC meetings last year, we went virtual with that and tried to say, okay, here's some, strategies for doing this. A lot of our assessors have been suggesting GoPros and mobile cameras out in the lab, and just having them, basically wear body cams while they're testing, which has been a really interesting way to do it. And then, fatigue, Zoom meeting fatigue is definitely a thing. So what we've actually found is that a lot of our assessors would schedule, instead of a 2-day assessment like normal on site, it would turn into a 4 or 5 day with shorter intervals. So it actually helps the lab not be as disrupted in their normal testing, but also kind of builds in breaks. And we try to allow our assessors and our labs to really kind of dictate a little bit on the flexibility of the assessment. So it definitely helps a little bit with that. Yeah, with field testing, it gets interesting because you're not necessarily out in the lab and have a hardwired connection. So I've been hearing a lot of people using smartphones and FaceTime to kind of get a good idea of those. But what we've discovered is a lot of the remote assessments are way heavier on record review. And that's been a good advantage because, you know, during our typical on-site assessments, it's been more of a sampling of records. And with going remotely, we've been able to look way more in depth at the records. And I think it's been a good learning experience for our customers, because we're finding a lot, you know, in that side of things, you know, contrary to, you know, previous years. And, you know, it's always good to get a good or another set of eyes and another perspective. So, you know, we're hoping that our, you know, our customers are finding that value added as well. And what we've been trying to do too is, you know, like trying to learn from our customers who have, you know, like especially our corporate systems, and seeing what they're doing for like internal auditing and stuff, because a lot of them have been doing it remotely for a while, and I think those have been our biggest contributors to everything. I mean, we've had some really interesting inspection bodies kind of implementing remote techniques as well. You know, we have a number of inspection agencies in the Middle East that do inspections on oil rigs and like other not easily accessible areas. So like we've seen, you know, drone videos that they use for training and stuff. So like, you know, it's been interesting to see the technology and like just the creativity that everyone's been doing to kind of get, you know, a good assessment process. As far as stuff going away, I mean, it's still definitely being discussed internally on, you know, if this is going to be the way of the future. I doubt that it will ever go fully remote. There's just, I mean, you know, there's just no way that you can see everything out in a lab remotely. There's just no way. And, you know, you're always going to have those customers where it's, you know, we have struggles with people not being technologically inclined, you know, or connection issues if they're out in the middle of nowhere. So, you know, like with those ones, it's definitely easier to be on site. Even with like the really well set up systems, we still find that being on site is way more efficient. So, you know, I could probably see, I mean, this is again just me speculating. There's been no decisions made at this point, is, you know, maybe doing like a rotating schedule or something. I could kind of see maybe that would be something in the future, but again, everything's going to have to go through the ILAC agreements and everything, and we'll have to make sure that, you know, our policies are accounting for that. But I mean, we're making those decisions with our, you know, our assessors in mind, with our customers in mind. So it's definitely been really cool to see the collaboration between everyone, and how we can, you know, continue to provide those services that are so critically needed, because our labs did not shut down during all of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really all I had.
Okay. Steve Small, do you have anything to add? Any comments, thoughts? So as we're waiting for Steve, I guess one of the things that was common, I think, theme with everybody so far has been, yeah, it's kind of nice, the remote, but being on site, especially the equipment. And that was one thing I was going to ask Maria, you know, really, when you are remote, you can't really assess the equipment other than looking at calibration records. That would be tough. I don't see that, you know, you really need an on-site inspection for that.
Well, what we've been doing is we've been having, if the laboratory standardizes or checks this equipment in-house, we've been having them demonstrate for us checking that equipment. And that has been interesting in and of itself, because we've learned a lot about how well some of these individuals have actually been trained to do that work. So we've actually found that to be beneficial in some ways, and we think that's something that we do want to keep. In some aspects, you're right, it's not the same as us checking it with our equipment, and we're not asking them to check as many things as we would check, but that has been our workaround, and it has kind of brought around another benefit. Sort of as Ingrid said, they're looking at quality systems more than they had before. We're looking at this aspect that we hadn't anticipated would end up being an important part of the assessment, but has turned out to be.
Yeah. Steve, did you get a voice line?
I did. To start with, CCRL shut down the field operations probably in March of last year, and we started doing the first-time labs in right around July, the new labs that needed to get accredited, that way they could get the job work, and they were really pushing to get something done. Some of them had jobs lined up, and they needed to get inspected, and then therefore, try and get CBOC getting accredited. Regular tour for CCRL resumed in 1st of August, and so far we've done 462 labs fully completed. Out of those labs, we had about roughly about 70 that were new labs, new to the program. Now with our inspection, we are offering an on-site, complimentary on-site follow-up visit. So we'll go ahead and we'll do a remote, and then if the laboratory wishes, they can get a on-site at a later date when we're back out resuming travel. Right now, we've had only 19% of those labs request to do that. And the new labs, they are required to get one, new labs with us. As far as it goes for review from inspectors and from a few specifiers, we've had some positive comments. We've also had some negative comments. Overall, I believe it's missing the detail that's needed. Sometimes the equipment doesn't line up with the records necessarily for one reason or another. Sometimes it's just the calibration agency puts the wrong serial number on things or something like that. So there's a little bit, sometimes you want to make sure that what's in the lab and then what you have paperwork-wise, that they jive. And that's one aspect, along with a whole bunch of others that are missing. We have a few standards that we really can't evaluate at all remotely. We're trying to do the best we can, but there's just no way to adequately do it without being on site. It's efficiency-wise, it's probably a remote is not quite as efficient as being on site. That's something that we found overall. I mean, we've been doing this now for a while, and we've tried to continually improve, make the process better. It has gotten better, it has gotten more efficient, but it still lacks the efficiency of the true on-site inspections that we've done in the past. Going forward, I think we'll probably end up doing perhaps a little bit of both. I mean, this is certainly good for new laboratories who really need to get something going right away. Instead of having to wait on us to fly out and get something started and things like that. So it's like it's another tool. It does have its pluses and minuses. The internet is an important aspect. We've also found the frames per second on a video camera are also important. When labs are doing such things as rotting, tamping, things like that, the video camera can easily miss that. When you're checking certain aspects of tests where there's a close attention to detail, video camera, or even with multiple angles of a video feed in a laboratory, it just is not as good as having eyes in the laboratory to see what's going on. And that's been brought up by a few laboratories as far as things could get misconstrued and perhaps taken the wrong way. And I can understand their perspective on that. But like I said, I think it's another something to look at. Certainly the technology's gotten a lot better in the last year. I mean, they've really pushed it through. We use Microsoft Teams pretty much solely, and it's just like they keep continuing to improve that. But anyway.
Okay, great. All right. Did any lab have any comment or issue, any experiences has a lab had that have been good, bad, things you like or didn't like about a remote assessment?
We've had one review so far, and we're having another one next week. Went very smoothly. I was surprised very little equipment was checked. I thought we would be putting calipers to things and bringing cameras down on different objects. It was more abbreviated than I had expected. But overall, it went very well. I think some improvements probably could be made on how information's provided to the assessor to make it more organized. I felt like I was doing a data dump, and I worried that that the assessor would have a difficult time understanding our quality system, just getting a dump of information at them. So, but I'm sure that is going to change over time and go smoother. I'm also wondering if new questions are being, put together for assessors to review a lab. You alluded to not seeing some things that you might otherwise observe. If you're using the same worksheets you used while you were at the lab, has it been thought about reworking what's going to be assessed if you were to continue these video camera audits where you could ask some questions that lead you to figure out some of the things that might be hidden from your camera's view?
We did rewrite a lot of our worksheets and have separate sets of worksheets that are specific to remote assessments that we would continue to use. But yeah, they are different.
They are. We reworked ours as well. We went through what we could look at, what we couldn't, and then added some additional criteria that would apply.
Yeah, ours is a bit different because we don't really have additional requirements because we typically use the ISO 17025 standard for testing, but there are some differences in how different specifiers are asking us to do things. So like different specific checklists are definitely getting looked at and revised. Ours is a lot training heavy. And I know that like some of our assessors, not that this like alleviates all of it, but we've been trying to get our assessors, like when they like log into a technical assessment, you have them say, hey, can you pick the laptop around or up and like turn around here, like so you're not just looking at one frame. It gets a little bit of it, and then you can kind of get an idea like, oh, if they left the garage door open or something and environmental conditions are going to be weird, you get some of those things too.
I was surprised that Steve said it was a little less efficient. I would have thought there'd be some cost savings doing a remote assessment.
We've actually noticed that remote assessment goes slightly faster for us by just a hair. And I think it has to do with how prepared everybody has to be before it can start. The laboratories have been forced to be more prepared than they were before. We have a better schedule laid out of exactly who's doing what at every time on the agenda, and that's determined with the laboratory ahead of time. So it hasn't been our case, but I think it's just probably some differences in how we're doing it. There's definitely cost savings. We pass that cost savings on to the customer, so we're not seeing any additional revenue or anything from it. We've reduced our fees by what the travel cost part of the assessment would have been.
Yeah, there's definitely a cost savings in missing out the travel expenses. We have noticed that preparation time significantly increases, but on-site time, like what we would consider on-site time, is pretty close to the same, if not a little bit faster. Yeah, like the more prepared the laboratory is, it goes much quicker. And again, it kind of depends on the lab. Like there's some that, if you have a lot of technical difficulties or they're having to scan in paper and your assessor's just sitting there, like those are not going to obviously go as efficient. But being forced to be prepared and everything has definitely helped the labs out in that regard. And hopefully that is something they continue to do.
Mm-hmm. That being the single biggest thing, the labs need to get prepared and ready and have their documents in a way to make them visible and presentable.
I think the other ABs are doing this too, but we do a dry run with the laboratory at least a week before their regular assessment starts. Hopefully more time. We do a tour, but it's also to make sure that everything's set up correctly. And that's the time we go over prep with them. We're like, here's all the things you need to do to make sure this is going to be successful. And that is communication, I think, has really helped, and our customers have appreciated that from what I have heard.
Yeah, dry runs are totally necessary.
Yeah, some of the efficiency work that's lost is kind of has to do with the screen burnout that everybody's talking about. Inspectors don't necessarily get that when they bounce from one lab to another. The inspectors usually do about 10 labs back to back in a given inspection trip, wherever they may be, and they can't necessarily do that because of the screen burnout that they're complaining about, and such as other people are talking about too with the fatigue. So that's the main thing. It does go. I would agree with what Maria said. It does go ever so slightly faster than time-wise than a normal one, but it also laps roughly a third, just about as far as what's normally looked at, and that being the equipment, which many people feel is an important part of any given test.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've only had 2 remote inspections. Both were test method specific, and they went really well, really quick. They were definitely more efficient, but they were set up on the front end really well too with the agencies, so that made a big difference. But we knew what to expect them coming in for, and we knew what they were going to ask for afterwards. So
Yeah, we had similar experiences. I think the feedback I got from our QA manager was that they went very efficiently because we knew exactly what procedures we were going to run. We had everything set up. We had samples prepared, and things went smoothly. And you guys didn't have the opportunity to look around and check for other things, so it went smoothly.
I'm really curious to hear from people that have had remote assessments, have been on the receiving end of this, what you think and what you think might be the future of this as well.
I think it was definitely a helpful tool so that we could add just one additional method to our accreditation instead of having to wait, until our full assessment comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree, and that's for like you guys, that was definitely a lot more efficient. In the past, we would have had to come up to your laboratory to add those additional tests that were needed. With the remote assessment, that's certainly one good thing that it can fill in for those things and get it done a lot more speedy.
I mean, kind of going along the theme of what you guys were talking about, I mean, to me, it would be good that a lab that is already accredited and is doing their next assessment, that they could do it by, video conferencing rather than having to have an on-site assessment. And maybe it's every other time that you have an on-site assessment, especially if you already, you know what the nonconformities were on the previous assessment, you know what to look for, and you know how the lab is performing overall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've been rolling that idea around every other or every third after an initial on-site accreditation, or after maybe a certain number of successful on-site assessments, something like that. We're definitely rolling it around, and we'd love to get feedback from this group.
Yeah.
Maria,
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
Maria, would you mind explaining what goes on in the dry run? I mean, I've reviewed the how to prepare sheet, but
Yeah.
I just want to know what to expect for that dry run. Is it mostly about your internet connectivity, or is it like the sit-down meeting prior to an inspection where you discuss how it's going to go?
Yeah, it's both. So we asked the laboratory to give us a tour so we can get the lay of the land the way you wouldn't really be able to otherwise because we're not there. So we can kind of have a mental idea of where things are. I will say it's never, you're still a little disoriented. It's never really perfect. But just kind of, getting that view, we asked to get close-up shots of serial numbers to make sure we can see them, and also to give the laboratory an idea of how it's going to go and what we're going to ask to see, and make sure that everybody can communicate. It's also a good time to check the internet connection at different portions of the lab wherever you're going to be doing testing, so that if there are issues, then there have been issues occasionally where we've said, look, your connection's not good enough to do this. We're going to have to figure something else out. Let's work on this. And we've been able to help them figure out a better solution to to get the connection speed they need to be able to move forward. But then the assessor actually shares their screen and shows an agenda for the assessment. And basically the assessor kind of comes with an idea of what they think things should be laid out with. And sometimes the laboratory says, no, we kind of have an idea of how the order we want to do things already, and it goes out the window. But other times, we'll just be able to help fill in names, especially because we do have customers that are trying to social distance. And if you have a time frame that each person is supposed to be in the laboratory, then the manager can kind of assign different people to be on different days or different hour or 2-hour blocks, so that the social distancing can still take place and everything. So did that help?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think it's a little different for everybody. I think what ACIL is doing is pretty similar based on my understanding.
Yeah, for the most part, I mean, what we've been encouraging our assessors to do is, like about a week prior, it's right about when we would submit an agenda and a document review. They would just kind of, use the same platform that they would plan on using. It kind of goes over like the controls of like how to use Teams and how to use Zoom or GoToMeeting, and like make sure that they know how to share their screen. That's been a big one. I mean, I've done a few personally for like quality management system, and that's always kind of been our biggest, question mark, is like, how do they know how to use these the conference software and everything. Definitely helps to check speed. And I think what a lot of our assessors have been doing is like, hey, I put together this agenda. Does this work for you? Are there any changes? And then also going over any like general questions on like how the assessment is going to work, I think has been helpful too, because then you're not necessarily going in, blind too. So like, I think our customers have appreciated having a little bit clearer of an understanding of, how this process is going to work. But yeah, getting a tour of the lab for sure. And because that's when you tend to find the dead zones of, where things are. And it happens to be right by the machines we need to look at. So trying to troubleshoot those things as well.
I do have a question for those that are doing the remote assessments. Are you tracking the feedback from your assessors on, their measure of confidence in the laboratories versus from remote to versus on-site?
Yeah, I mean, our assessors are primarily staff, so I talk to them very regularly about it, and we keep trying to get their feedback and input on how this is going. For the most part, pretty positively is how they view it. I've got a couple of people who, boy, do they want to get back out on the road. They really, really, they want to travel, but they understand kind of why we're doing what we're doing for now. But in terms of the actual assessment process, they've seen that it's effective. Their biggest headache, honestly, is getting the paperwork they need, because even if a lab thinks they've submitted everything, there's some things that we need to see that the lab may not recognize, and we try to create checklists and everything, but there's still things that aren't on there. So that their biggest headache is that back and forth of trying to get the documents and getting them in a timely manner from the customer as well. Sometimes we'll get stuff 5 minutes before the end of the assessment, and we have to kind of make that call of whether we can accept it at that point or not. How about others?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a similar experience. So we have a lot of staff members doing like the quality management system related, and then we'll be paired up with like another technical assessor. The other nice part of this is, so HLA staff members send or will periodically go on site to monitor our assessors. And typically we do 4 a year about, but with not being able to travel last year, we were trying to figure out how we were going to do that. well, it's actually resulted in a lot of us sitting in on these remote assessments. So we've been able to kind of get like real-time feedback from assessors, and our customers, and like kind of getting like a really good idea of like, okay, who does really well with remote assessments and who you can tell they just really don't like it. we're definitely collecting that feedback as well. I mean, from really everyone. But it's been nice to like be first person, observing how everything is going. Because I mean, I like to sit in on my labs because I know them, and it's been helpful for them to be able to put faces with names and everything, and like there's been some help with that. We've definitely been discovering too, though, like with our international customers, language barriers have been a huge issue. Time zones. We've been asking our assessors to try to schedule the assessments in local time zones, but that's resulted in a lot of our assessors getting up in the middle of the night to do an assessment for the Middle East. And but like language barriers, it's really hard to kind of get some of the social cues through remote. And or what we've also discovered is a lot of the people who are translators are also the quality managers who have to go get documents. So then we're kind of running into having someone there who can help communicate. And that's been a big hurdle we're still trying to work on, overcoming. But like, yeah, that's been a big struggle for sure.
For CCRL, we go to great lengths to try to hire people who like to travel, and now they're not traveling, so that doesn't go over well. Probably somewhere around 75% of our inspectors are ready to get back out. They're ready to resume travel, and they've been that way since probably September last year. They're chomping at the bit to get out there. Some of the things that come up, as far as how they feel about it, the feedback, some people like it better. I would say probably most of them probably don't think it's quite as detail-oriented or as thorough. It's impersonal is another term I've heard used a lot. Also, when a laboratory makes a mistake on a test, the inspector will pick up the equipment and try and show them how to do it right, try to explain it better, fill in the gaps that perhaps the standard's missing or something like that, or that just aren't clear, basically, in the standard, I guess I should say. And that's something that's very tough to do. Some people draw it out sketch paper for the lab, but it's certainly not as good as picking up the equipment and trying to explain it that way in person. Again, trying to get everybody on the same page on how to run a test. That's probably the biggest complaint I've heard about it, and it's something that's a real struggle to try and do remotely.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Steve. The educational aspect of what we do is it's more difficult in this environment.
Yeah. Well, that was a great conversation. It was really interesting, and glad we could get that in. What I'd like to do is make a little transition here. I see we have Mike Oscar has made it to his office. No serious accidents or malfunctions on the way. So, Mike, are you ready to get back on with your discussion?
First, I apologize for that logistics, but if you've been in the Washington, D.C. area, right now the Capitol is closed down with gates that are about 10 feet high with barbed wire, and there's roughly about 5,000 National Guards. So trying to even pull over or trying to get, your car in some situation, I just don't need the aggravation. And it's pretty much blockaded the entire parameter of it. So 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Street. And earlier this week, the Pentagon came out and said that structure is going to stay in place until May 23rd. But they're going to reduce the National Guard presence to about 2,300. So cutting it in half. I only say that because that's the situation I was in. So I had to get out of there. And the amount of outside influence around with the cameras and everything, it's just hard to get a signal. So with that said, I will be quick. But I did want to mention that I did mention earlier that I did sit down with Senator Cardin's staff and with Senator Cardin to go over where he believes, because he is chair of the Subcommittee of Transportation and Infrastructure on the Environmental Public Works Committee, dealing with the upcoming infrastructure bill. And I did send you the link for Biden's Build Back Better plan. But as I mentioned earlier, they talk about national laboratories. I really want to see exactly what they mean by that, because obviously if government is going to build out these laboratories, and that's an unfair competition for us, we need to be prepared for that, especially when it comes to infrastructure. On that, and I'll keep you posted. The big issue right now is it's really just speculative. I don't have anything concrete. I do know that the highway, transit, and rail reauthorizations are all up on September 30th, and what they've done previously in the last administration under the last 4 years, especially last year, was that they just extended it for 1 year. But now, because both chambers of the Capitol, along with the executive branch, are controlled by one party, there is some discussion about whether or not to get a larger infrastructure package done. Earlier today, the president did sign the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. That's over $2 trillion. That being said, they anticipate that this infrastructure package will be roughly $4 trillion. So what does that mean? And I think there's agreement for a permanent user fee, which would be not a gas tax option, but what would that user fee look like and how would that be paid out? We don't know yet, but I think there's consensus amongst most transportation and infrastructure communities, whether it be architects, engineers, yourself included. There seems to be an agreement or consensus around the user fee. What that looks like right now, I do not know, but that would be to permanently pay down the Highway Trust Fund to allow these projects moving forward. We would like to see at least a 5-year reauthorization for long-term planning and investment. That would help you, obviously, and would certainly allow for you to plan accordingly instead of working on the shoestring budgets that come out or Band-Aid projects. So I get that. We're also looking to ensure that to build out on the delivery and regulatory approval process enhancements made, which were made previously in the last two transportation laws to ensure timely delivery of projects and benefits. And I think we should have, as ACIL, CMET sections to talk about that process and to ensure that any approval process is done in a much more timely and efficient manner, which I know those delays on projects and materials obviously come as an expense to you, especially if you're testing them accordingly. The concern that I have beyond the user fee is that the president has come out and said he does not want to raise the federal gas tax, which has not been raised since 1993. And that's an issue because that's currently at 18.4 cents per gallon. And the issue there is that we're beyond the user fee. Where do you get to pay for this? And is it going to be $4 trillion that the government's just going to come up with, and how are we going to pay for that? We're also looking at bonding requirements and approval for permanent environmental review processes. What are those? How can we assure that these environmental review processes that are in place, especially for water and surface transport projects, transportation projects, how long will they take, how will they be delayed, and how will they be transparent? So if there is a delay, how we can get involved in that as well. But I end with this, and that is I do have scheduled within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and the reason for that is because a lot of these discussions are going on right now. I do believe that there probably will not be another COVID relief package. There were 6 packages passed since the start of this virus, and I don't believe that there will be another one. So the next March
Mike, you're popping out.
We'll come in and deal with
All right, yeah, I think we lost Mike. Okay.
We'll go ahead and just pick this up. The next meeting for CMET is on April 8th, so
Yeah.
we'll bring it back at that time.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, Mike. You're starting to lose quality and you're popping out. So I think you got your main points through, I believe. Yep. So appreciate that. And we can follow up on a future meeting on any updates, since that's an ongoing reauthorization. So thank you. Does anyone have any comment on that yet? Okay. Well, thanks. So the last item we had was talking about technician training and certification, in COVID era, whether it be remote or virtual or what's going on. Similar to the accreditation assessments, going remote, and we have the same issues with training, certification, and that kind of documentation. So I don't think we had anything formal presentation other than just a roundtable. What's been good? What's been bad? Has there been a change? Online computer-based testing has been, around, so that's still there. Have there been local ACI certification issues or what? I guess we can pick it up. I guess I'll start to say that I do a lot of the ACI certifications in Wisconsin, and we've cut back on the number of bodies in a room to allow for social distancing, but we've been live. We're doing everything as we have been, just spread it out a little bit more, and trying to keep up with that. And we did take a break early on when it started, just because the meeting space was an issue. To try to get a hotel conference room or things like that weren't an option for a while, but that seems to be getting much better. So anyone else have any?
I can speak from the AASHTO accreditation standpoint on this a little bit. I'm one of the quality analysts, and we've actually experienced a lot of, depending on the region in the country, some of our laboratories have come across major issues trying to find certifications. It was a really big problem last spring and summer when a lot of certification agencies were completely closed down. Some of those are opened up again, but some of them have backlogs, so it still might be a few months before someone gets certified. Also, some of the companies for the laboratories that we work with, they aren't allowing their staff to travel for certifications still, even though there might be certification programs or agencies that have opened back up. And then in addition to that, depending on the area, some of the supervisors or technicians may have pre-existing health conditions, and they just don't feel comfortable going for certifications right now. So we've kind of had to adjust our expectations for laboratories. And what we've decided to do is, if a lab is seeking any ASTM quality management system standards that would require an external certification, we would not grant that new method until they do meet the minimum requirements, but we are lenient. So, maybe someone's file was due this month, but they can't get a certification until June. As soon as that certification is received, we would grant that ASTM quality management system standard for them. And then if a laboratory already has a quality management system standard, and say their technician certification expired during COVID and they're actively working to get certified, and there's not something available, or their company isn't letting them go out and get a certification right now, we do work with them as long as they have a plan in place that we can follow up on to make sure their staff is certified.
Okay. But if someone was previously accredited, let's say to E329 or C1077, had some personnel change or something, or couldn't renew a certification, that accreditation would be allowed to extend.
So it's a case-by-case basis. We've realized we can't really give an umbrella statement for it. In most cases, we have done an extension of that accreditation as long as there's someone in their facility that is accredited that can perform the testing that's required. And then they have a plan. Like I said, maybe it's 2 more months, 3 more months until that individual is certified. And we follow up to make sure they do get the certification. If they don't get it, we would withdraw, say, E329 at that time.
Okay.
Yeah,
Seems fair.
we've been doing similar for that too. I mean, it's definitely, you can't make an umbrella statement just because each situation is different. But yeah, like typically, you know, if it's someone who's held that certification before and it expired and there's just no one available to do those certifications, you know, like doing, you know, like a follow-up, you know, we call them like contingencies. You know, they have to provide a plan, they have to provide, you know, an estimated date, and then we will follow up, and they have to provide it in order to maintain their accreditation. You know, with new labs, it gets a little bit more complicated because you don't necessarily have previous history to back up, you know, performance and everything. So like, you know, those get a little bit trickier. But we are trying to be, you know, understanding of the situation. And it's, I mean, it's hard to put it on labs to say that you aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing when it's really they just can't. So, you know, I think, you know, we're all trying to be understanding of those situations. And, you know, hopefully as things open up more, I mean, we've been having some significant issues, you know, like in New York and Houston, you know, like when they were completely shut down, you know, going for live classes just wasn't an option. And there is a backlog. So, you know, just trying to be understanding of, you know, like everyone's timeline on that. And, you know, there are processes that we can, you know, take to, you know, allow for, you know, like extending accreditation or something. But I mean, they're all case by case. And I mean, with everything through COVID, communication is key. So, you know, it's also helpful for us to know if, you know, like, you know, if proficiency testing is just, you know, so backlogged you can't get samples, you know, those things like we kind of hear secondhand. So it's important to, you know, communicate those issues, and then, you know, we're more aware of what we can do with those.
One of the big problems that we are having right now is the C1093 requirement for masonry. That standard now requires certification, and it's probably about 50-50 right now with the labs as far as they have it. Some areas are pretty good, some areas aren't. And that basically comes down to, you know, most people are trying to do the ACI, which is predominantly the big one that's out there available. Some areas have it going, some areas don't. For Maryland, as far as the ACI chapter, which doesn't offer that certification, but for the regular concrete certifications, they are open to doing it, and they're scheduling classes. However, it's a reduced number of people in the classes. So it's going to create a backlog, as has been said.
Yeah, I can second that on the masonry. I've been looking to find that near us, and it's just not available. So
yeah, and it's some of those certifications we offer the practical portion when we're on site, and then the laboratory can go take the written with any of the other chapters that may just do a field for like say, but you know, that option's not out there right now for the laboratory, so because we're not traveling.
Right.
We have seen, so we started, Steve, was it September 2020 that you guys started assessing for C1093 for certifications?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And so as soon as we started getting those reports, we started obviously seeing the nonconformities and started to require the certifications on our end for 1093. We do see it a lot. A lot of laboratories have gone the route of creating their own internal written exams for C1093 because it does allow for an internal versus an external. And most of them still would like to get something like ACI in the future, but this is kind of just something to hold them over until the certifications are available in their area. And that's helped a lot of our laboratories. Just have to keep in mind, it works for C1093 masonry, but E329 masonry still requires the external certification for the supervisor.
Okay. And with the C1093, does that require the hands-on performance examination as well, or just the written?
It's going to be both, yeah.
Okay.
But the performance can be internal or external.
Okay. Okay.
And it requires both certifications. There's a laboratory and a field, and laboratory should have both.
Okay. Interesting. Does any laboratory have any stories, horror stories, or problems? Has it been a problem to get technicians certified? Does it affect projects? Does it affect business to be able to get people on site? Has that been an issue with anybody?
I know Michigan accepted an extension on certifications last summer. So things that were to expire last summer for the DOT certs, they would, yeah, as long as someone has been has received a an IAT, which is, you know, a verification test by someone else with MDOT out on a job site, they could continue to work for that year.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure there's a backlog this year, all these people that weren't able to get certified last year.
Yeah. That's what we're seeing as well. The Wisconsin DOT extended everybody in a similar fashion. And this year they've really scrambled to get things online. And we've even had, technicians doing the testing in this type of an atmosphere on a Zoom meeting or GoToMeeting. And then when they're in a laboratory, holding their phone and trying to videotape them, or film them doing the test, or getting someone else to hold the phone for them. So it's been, we've seen a much longer duration with these online training and testing, but it's there, so that's good. But it's, instead of a 2 or 3 day process, it's a week-long process for the most part, and more costly, of course, but at least it's available. Okay. All right, any other thoughts, concerns, issues on training or certification, issues and problems? I thought there'd be a little bit more there, but it's good. Good. So those are all the topics. So I don't know if we have Mike Oscar back, if he wanted to finish off, or if he did lose his connection, I'm not sure. We tried to get in here once or twice and seemed to keep losing his connection.
No, can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. We can hear you. Yep.
All I'm saying is that if they go through the regular, if they go through the budget reconciliation process like they did with the COVID relief package for an infrastructure bill, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be germane. There are not enough mandatory issues. Mandatory funding is required for budget reconciliation. A lot of these programs, unfortunately, aren't mandatory. They're going to be new programs coming in. So we have to just battle through that and figure out my concern is not the House, it'll be the Senate, and figuring out, do we use the filibuster to get to the 60 votes that we need to get something passed? But we'll know that, and hopefully we have something ready to go by the end of September. And as I learn more, I will share it with the section. So thank you for your patience this afternoon, and stay tuned. But I think we're closer to something than we've been in the last several years. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time today.
My pleasure.
And get your perspective. All right. I think we reached our agenda. How's everyone doing? We need a little take a break and call it till next P2 meeting in person in DC. That sound like a plan?
Yeah. From this point on is the part I miss.
Yeah, exactly.
I assume you're talking about happy hour.
Meeting at happy hour.
Yeah, I miss that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the same when it's virtual.
No. I was listening to a historian talk about what happened after the pandemic that happened in 1919, and they said, hey, after that we had the Roaring 20s, so maybe we'll have the Roaring 20s again.
Well, there's a good thought.
We'll all go crazy.
Yeah.
That's a good plan.
Good
Okay.
seeing you all.
Well, thank you, everybody. I think we had some really good discussions today. Thank you,
Very good,
Maria, Ingrid,
as
Steve.
always.
Yep, for your presentations. Thanks for everyone joining us, and have a good day. Wait, I have a saying. We can all part on a saying to go ahead with, and that is that the unprepared mind cannot see the outstretched hand of opportunity. Opportunity. That's by Sir Alexander Fleming.
Okay, let's good one.
All right, so everyone go and prepare for that opportunity. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
everybody.
Nice to see some faces.
All right.
Nice.
All righty.